Right, again. So I'm going to pick up on more detail about the European Location Services project. This is a project that's being co-financed under the Connecting Europe facility with a range of partners. Our partners in this project are mainly members of EuroGeographics. So, is that right? Is everybody too cool? So we have a vision for European Location Services, which is about providing the single access point or the gateway to that official quality assured data that I was talking about earlier. And it's about complementing what national bodies are doing on Inspire, so to support that activity and work. Yes, I think it's quite clear. So you might have heard of the European Location Framework project, which happened before we started on European Location Services. And it's been a long-running ambition of EuroGeographics, our members in the community, to see Inspire services brought together on a European level to serve some of the uses that we heard about earlier and from Julian, and EuroGeographics working with our members to do that. So within the European Location Services program, we have a funded project, as I just mentioned, to focus specifically on the open data elements, which in some ways makes life a little bit easier because we don't have to worry so much about business models. But in another way, it's more challenging because I'm sure you appreciate the amount of open data available at the Inspire detailed level of content is still a bit of a challenge. But it does provide us with an opportunity to focus on demonstrate what's possible under an open license. And we have a 2-year project that will finish in the summer next year to further develop some of the infrastructure we've been looking at and to provide some outputs on an open data perspective. But that's just one element of a longer term program of European Location Services. So the aims of this specific project are to be a little bit clearer about what's available, what's free, what's charged for, what does open mean, and to show some of the benefits of making that data available and easy to find. Yeah, as I said, it's really part of the step in moving to the next stage of making Inspire services available. So we have quite a lot of work in the project, and there's a few of us that are now running a little bit faster because the end of the project is in the mid next year. But we have identified a need for example, a data policy on open national authoritative geodata. That's something that has been developed. It's available on our website, so it explains a little bit more about the policy behind open data and the approach we're taking in the project, and a standard open data license. So there is quite a lot of open data licenses across Europe, but there's different variations in how member states have made open data available. When we're doing this on a pan-European level, we need to adopt a single license. Again, that's now available on our website. We haven't done the promotional release of that yet. There'll be some more news early next year, but you can have a look and see that available. And some other elements of the project: help desk, business model operational plans, so feeding back into the longer term sustainability of this, agreements with our members to provide data, and then I guess the more interesting thing, working on use cases and making the services actually available. Yeah, some of the milestones, I'm not going to go into that because of time, but I think what I wanted to focus on was to pick up what I said earlier about taking a user approach and entering into a new project has given us a chance to look at that a little bit differently. because of course there's no point in us doing a lot of work unless it's going to be used by the user. And it's not just about implementing Inspire, but developing a longer term vision. As I mentioned earlier, we've undertaken a process to engage directly with users, including Eurostat and others. And we had information already available on what users had told us already, but what we were missing was a little bit more detail behind that. So we've used an established methodology in the project to identify what were the highest priority issues to users using this data, and to ask them what is it that you're trying to do with the data, what are you trying to achieve, not trying to present what we already had or trying to present Inspire, but understanding some of the issues. So we undertook a number of interviews. We had a standard interview template. I'd be happy to share that template if it helps anybody else, to understand exactly what people are trying to do, how does it relate to policies or outcomes, who's involved, what technology are you using, what are the issues that you're having, what might you want to do in the future that you're not able to do now, to trying to capture some of the problems that people are having, to identify what we could do. We then done some analysis to develop that into user stories. If you're not familiar with user stories, basically it's a way of describing a scenario. So as a person, as an analyst, as a policymaker, what's the person's role? What is it that you want to do? Why do you want to do that thing, and what does success look like? So that we were able to take the interviews into a standard format where we could see what were the most common things coming out, and start to provide some analysis and categorization of that. Again, I'm happy to share the approach. Clearly there's probably some sensitivities in some of the content, but it provided us for the first time a way of looking kind of like by like rather than just anecdotal evidence. We consolidated all of the feedback that we received into topic areas. So what were people saying about transportation? What was said about addressing? What was the requirement? What could we maybe do to help? So we generated some of these summaries as well. Of course, we can find out everybody's shopping lists, and as Julie said, some of them could be quite ambitious. I guess some of them are quite long. We have a fixed amount of time in the project and a fixed amount of resources. So what we also conducted was a survey about available data, and then we could provide a match between what the user requirements, the user need was, what was available quite quickly that was open, and the resources that we had in the project, and what opportunities we thought were going to create the biggest impact in the project. So we created some proposals of specific products that we wanted to develop. I mean, what I would say is on the user design, we haven't just stopped. So the survey that we did with our users in the interviews was important. But we're continuing in the project to do things like an SME survey that's in process at the moment. We would quite like to have some more in-depth discussions about specific topics. Possibly we'll do some webinars, that's got to be decided. And we have done a test evaluation with the European Environment Agency, for example, the Copernicus services, to try and, again, create this iteration of us providing something and getting some feedback, and then working through how to make some improvements. There's a limited number of iterations that you can do in a project environment, but it's providing quite a lot of good feedback to us on how we move forward. So we have a number of services that are, I'd say, in development. Both, they have different aspirations on what we'll be able to do in the project and release dates. Our Euro Global Map Open Data has been available as a data service for a while, but we're going to bring that into a services environment to help application developers and others be able to access that in a different way. And that helps us understand the difference between people accessing data sets and services and begin to test some of that thinking a little bit. We're developing a geographical names gazetteer. We have a lot of data in our existing EuroGeographics products, Euro-Regional Map and Euro-Boundary Map, but it's not being surfaced in a gazetteer way. So we know that geographical names as an Inspire data set, as a level of detail, is a highly demanded service. We think that's going to take a while to achieve. So we were thinking, what else can we do? And we actually have a lot of content already from our existing products that we're going to try and open up and make available. So that's quite exciting because it'll be a pan-European product under an open license. And we're expecting to have that, I think, around April next year is the first availability. And then we go on to the more detailed level of data from Inspire. So we're working on a cadastral index map, basically property level data as a view service that we think is really needed for reference purposes in the land and property space. Addressing data as an Inspire service, buildings and transportation network. When we're getting to these services, the main issue that we're running into is coverage under open license. But we think that by bringing together what is available and showing how that might work in a range of applications, that could help support making more data available, and also as a community showing what's possible with the data and services that are all sitting in member states when we start to bring them together. So there's quite a lot to do in a relatively short amount of time, but we hope that this will provide a good taster of what's available in the community, and it will also provide a lot of learning to us in terms of making stuff available to users and feeding back and developing. I would say that we're not necessarily wedded to Inspire, so Inspire is a good starting point for us because there's some infrastructure there. But we're more concerned about making things that are helpful for users. And on that point, I should say that we're working with some of the vendor software providers, Esri, Safe, for example, to also help us look at how we make things available, because it's not just about the data, but also about the tools and the link of the tools that the users have. So we're working with some of those providers as well. So just to mention, of course, the technical side is one thing, the policy and the license is another. We've had really good feedback on both our open data policy position and the license that's in development. So we have a standard license for our products that we're asking our data providers to sign up to, rather than trying to create a license that includes 6 or 7 other people's open data licenses, which should obviously be very complicated. So just to conclude then, I think the main focus on the workshop is about user. The approach that we've started to use about putting the user at the center has really brought a lot more focus to our work. So coming out of the ELF project, we had lots of different opportunities and lots of prototypes and different ideas. And it's let us step back a little bit and prioritize what are the services that will provide the biggest impact. Some of that was just validating work that we'd already started, but even that validation has been quite useful in terms of communicating where we've been spending our resources. We also uncovered some new ideas that we've been looking at, and yes, an evidence base. So when we look at taking the project further forward, again, that user research is really important to us. It's been great working directly with some of the users. It's great being in Eurostat and understanding more directly what people are doing. It's been great discussing with some of the SMEs. Like I said, there's a danger otherwise that you're building something and then you hope someone's going to use it. It's given me a lot of insight, and I think other members of the team too. Sometimes it's hard to identify who the users are, and I think that was mentioned earlier this morning on a European level. And also, we're dealing with a large geographical area. Yes, sometimes the availability of people to meet with us and provide input can be a little bit challenging, although it's generally been pretty good actually. And also, one of the challenges is making sure that we're speaking to the right people. So have we spoken to people who are interested in transportation? Have we spoken to people interested in energy? Have we spoken to people interested in health? It's almost like it's such a broad application of what we do. Trying to find the broad representation of the users can be challenging. And of course, we're always constrained by the data and what's actually available to us. So we can only work within the constraints and limitations that we have. And we continue to try and push those. So that's just an overview of what we've been doing on our OpenELS project and the user perspective. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Abigail, again. So, is there some questions? Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. And have you considered scientists as users? Because in the late years, there is, for example, the OpenStreetMap community that has emerged because for scientists, it's a useful asset to do research, not limited on one area, but that can be done comparably on several cities, for instance, or several places. And obviously, OpenELS could be a very relevant framework for scientists. So did you try to reach these users?
Yeah, we haven't engaged too much in that community in this project. We've actually just written a project proposal under the Connecting Europe facility for our next piece of work, which would start next September. And the research and academic network is one of the areas that we've targeted in that proposal for the next piece of work. Clearly, it would be very interesting in the prototypes and the initial services we're making available if we could reach some of those networks even in this stage. So if you had some specific ideas, then it would be great if you could point us and we'll try and make people aware it's available, and maybe in future we'd have the funding to do some more detailed research.
In your presentation, you have talked about 3 prototype use cases. Which are there?
Yeah, it's quite early stages on those use cases because it's dependent on the services being developed. But we have one which is in the Nordic regional area looking at an emergency service use case. So they've actually, we were just speaking about it last week, and they've done some really good user interviews. They developed a prototype to take out to speak to some users. For example, I can't remember if it was I think it was the Nordic kind of emergency, like 112 service, for example, had no mapping that was cross-border. So they said, if it was available, we would take it immediately. So there's some really good stories coming out of developing that prototype and going to speak to potential users. So we have one, yes, that's kind of a Nordic emergency use case. We're doing one in the land and property space that I can't really share too much on right now, but there's a few SMEs in that area that we're looking at working with. And we would like to do one that has more of a policy kind of decision-making type feel as well. So it's quite early stages at the moment. We've got quite a lot of potential use cases, and we're trying to narrow down now according to the service development what we focus on.
Still time for one question? I have one, Abigail. So you were speaking about European